Thank you so much, Dr. Roberts. I'm very excited to introduce the next portion of our event. We have our Collaborative Caregiving in Action panel. So if our panelists will start making their way up onto the stage to their seats. So Caryn, who's our fabulous moderator, is a care partner for her husband Al, who was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease just over 3 years ago. She's a member of the Parkinson's Foundation's People with Parkinson's Advisory Council, or PPAC, and planning committee of this summit. Caryn has had an extensive educational and professional background in medical market research. Prior to retiring, she conducted qualitative market research for pharmaceutical companies, medical device manufacturers and suppliers, laboratories, hospitals and healthcare organizations, advertising agencies, and insurance companies in the United States and Europe. So I'm going to turn it over to Caryn and let her introduce you to our wonderful panelists.
Can you hear me? No. Okay, let's try this again. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. As you know, no, you're saying up. You're saying better. Okay. Are we still good? Okay. As you know, I'm Caryn Balaban, and I believe it was Annie that just gave the introduction, I think. Now tell me again what I'm supposed to do. Move it a little closer to me. Okay, I'm not allowed to move. Are we good? Okay, so before my husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, I was what's called a medical moderator. So it was ironic that by the time Al had the diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, I had already interviewed hundreds, if not thousands, of people from around the world who either had Parkinson's or were caring for somebody who had Parkinson's disease. I learned that those who see themselves as care partners are usually in the earlier stages of the disease, when their loved ones are still able to take care of their own activities of daily living. And those who saw themselves as caregivers are usually deeper in the trenches and are usually caring for loved ones who can no longer do many of the activities of daily living. All of the caregivers, regardless of how they see themselves, have one thing in common. You're just people who have found that your lives have gone off the path that they thought they would take. You've had to readjust your expectations and look at what life is today and not what life will be. And if you're very lucky, you have learned how to celebrate life in your new normal. The people that I'm about to introduce you to today have experienced the very good as well as the very bad aspects of caregiving, and have each in their own way learned how to wear the mantle of caregiver with self-respect, compassion, and a great sense of humor. To my far right is Dean Clarke Taylor. Dean, just give a little wave, okay. Dean is a 68-year-old caregiver to his life partner, Bill Sabatino. Almost 4 years ago, Bill's numerous medical issues were misdiagnosed and improperly treated. Everything fell into place when Bill was finally diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Bill and Dean are grateful for each day they are given to be together. Their journey is one of communication, compassion, collaboration, listening, and love. Learning about PD and applying that knowledge to both of their daily lives has brought a new dimension to the meaning of relationship, hope, help, respect, dignity, support, mortality, and gratitude. Dean's mantra is, each day is a gift, each day is a gift, each day is a gift, repeat. To my right is Lesley Peters. Lesley's journey with Parkinson's disease started in 1998 when her mother-in-law was diagnosed with the disease. In 2007, Lesley's husband developed his first symptoms. Lesley currently serves as the co-chair of the Parkinson's Foundation People with Parkinson's Advisory Council, known as PPAC. Getting involved with the Parkinson's Foundation and advocating for people with PD has changed the course of her life. She is honored to be part of the Care Partner Summit. To my immediate left is Addison Diehl. L is in his 8th year. Addison Can I call you Al? Yeah. Is in his 8th year of caregiving for a parent with Parkinson's, including 3 years as a full-time caregiver. Addison has designed, developed, and delivered curriculum for caregivers, specifically for those facing ambiguous loss, the experience of grieving the loss of someone both here and not here. And finally, in 2016, Lisa Seghetti stood alongside her father while he suffered from Parkinson's disease. Although officially diagnosed in 2008, her father had been living with the disease for many years before sadly succumbing to complications related to Parkinson's in 2012. As an advocate for the Parkinson's Foundation Parkinson's Advocate and Research, or PAIR program, Lisa served on the panel that reviewed grant applications for the Parkinson's Foundation Summer Fellowship Program. She has also supported a bilingual Parkinson's disease informational session. And now we will start.
Again, my name is Dean Taylor, and this is my story. My partner, Bill Sabatino, and I moved to Scottsdale in 2009. And unknown to us, Bill's recurring medical problems were worsening over time. He had indigestion, stomach pain, constipation, loss of smell, smaller handwriting, little or no smiling, the immobile arm when he was walking, and shuffling gait. Does this sound familiar? It's a long list. But apparently not to many doctors that we consulted. And I want to be clear, I'm not bashing the medical profession as it stands today. I'm saying we have room for improvement, and I hope that that does happen. We all need to have the diagnosis sooner. At any rate, neither the doctors nor the diagnostic testing confirmed anything wrong with Bill. Bill believed they were right and was an obedient soldier and forged onward through his discomfort and pain. As for me, I take a very different approach. If I go to the doctor with a complaint, I will listen to the suggestions, take the medication if necessary, and then I do have that check back where I say, I should be better. I should be getting better. And there's a reasonable amount of time, it's hard to explain, but it's a reasonable amount of time where that should be happening. Or I try another doctor. And I think that's something you should look at. It's not to say don't give a reasonable amount of time. It's to say that you ultimately want to be feeling better or something isn't right. In Bill's case, I had to work on him to do that. In our case, Bill's list kept growing. Low blood pressure, brownouts, a blackout in the bathroom. He actually fell backwards and hit the toilet, breaking the toilet tank. We thought he was still okay, but he wasn't. Finally, in 2015, I noticed that Bill was losing his voice. He has almost like a broadcaster's quality of voice. And he was getting very breathy up like this. And it was a dramatic change. So I said, Bill, we've got to go to another doctor. We've got to find out what's wrong with you. Luckily, that doctor referred us to a movement disorder specialist, and then he was diagnosed with PD. We were both reeling from that diagnosis. We had done everything right, didn't we? We took care of ourselves. We ate well. We drank water. We exercised, plenty of sleep, go to the doctor, go to the dentist when it's necessary. We were two gay men who had lived for decades in the metro New York area. We had survived the Con Edison blackouts, the nor'easters, the stock market crash, the AIDS crisis, 9/11. And yet, this was not something we could solve. We had a plan to get older together, but we didn't plan on getting sick. Bill faced death and now faced mortality, his own mortality. I feared every outcome that was to happen to us that I could imagine. Thankfully, I sat down calmly and tried a meditation, and the answer finally came to me in a period of time. Fear not. That was the biggest hurdle and challenge that we had. Fear. We were scared to death. We didn't know what to do. It paralyzed us. We were on a collapsing bridge, and we had to get to the other side and rebuild our lives and get more information and help. For us, the key was as simple as this. Patty Hatton at Muhammad Ali, Parkinson Center. Well-deserved applause. She was referred to us in a very unusual way. I thank Patty, her colleagues, the classes, the instructors, service referrals, support groups, and the outstanding Barrow medical team who've opened doors we could only have imagined. I only have 10 minutes or so to speak today. It would take hours to give you all of the details of what they've done to help us. But I will say this quickly. Find your Patty if you haven't already. I was asked about best moments on our journey, and one that comes immediately to mind was finding out, getting the diagnosis. Then we knew what was wrong. Secondly, we had gone to vacation in Santa Fe this past August, and Bill was looking at a hill. It's quite hilly there. And there was a hill, and he said to me, you know, I'm watching these grandmothers walking up this hill, and it looks pretty steep. And I said, yeah. And he says, well, I don't think I could do that. And I said, well, why don't we try? Why don't we just, one morning go and see? And within a week or so, he was able to walk up Grandma's Hill. And it was a real gift to me to be able to see him not only take the challenge, but then to his satisfaction, accomplish that particular goal for himself. We also attended a local PD choir performance of Troon Tunes, which is up in Troon, that's why they have the name, at their Christmas 2017 concert. Bill was asked to sing with the group, and after the concert, each singer was asked to what was their most memorable Christmas and why. When he came to speak, it was his term, he said very clearly, being with my life partner, Dean, makes every day seem like Christmas. That one got me. It did. It did. But it was a memorable moment. You never know when they're going to tell you, right? The advice I would like to share with you is, of course, we have to maintain ourselves. And in my case, I was suffering from depression. I talked about it in other support groups, and I found that many people were experiencing depression and were doing something about it. And in my case, I did find a wonderful therapist, and I was prescribed an antidepressant medication, as was Bill. And I cannot tell you how much of a difference that has made. And I would urge you, if you are feeling, your self-talk is depressive and you're not able to get out of it, and you're saying, this is too much, I can't, I could, if. It's amazing what an antidepressant can, in many cases, do, and I urge you to do that, if that's your case. The second area that I would urge you to do is watch the maintenance of your loved one. I think the biggest thing was I would jump in and try to fix everything because he was sick. And he was sick, but he wasn't dead. And it was robbing him of independence and his self-esteem and cognition. So I had to step back from that and say, this guy can do a lot. He will cook and he'll ask me to help him. We work together with that, and that is our collaborative medicine, I would say. I was also speaking with Caryn about something we stumbled over, which was loosely called the table. The table is a relationship maintenance tool that we use that was given to us from some friends of ours. And it's pretty simple. What it does is it formalizes the time and place where you speak in an unthreatened way with your partner. So it's a figurative or literal table. In our case, it's our living room. And we do it on a monthly basis, the 19th of the month. Time can vary and it can change if you need to, but it's a planned appointment just like any other appointment would be that you would honor. And I think that was one of the problems we were having, is that we were too busy and we would not allow ourselves that particular time. By making it an appointment, we honor that and don't schedule things over it and make that appointment. It's a comfortable space. There are no distractions, pets or mobile devices or whatever. And the goal is to communicate, first of all, what is going right. So each partner takes that turn. And we are very pleased that many things are going right. Then the second partner says what's going right, and then you've built this very positive environment. And then you say, what's going wrong? What's not going quite right? And again, this is non-threatening. It's not you didn't take the garbage out. You do the, I noticed that, dear, you weren't taking the garbage out. So it allows them that dignity and that space to also try to construct a better relationship. There is a time for rebuttal, and also we take one or two things that we want to try to correct that month, the next month. And we check in on that the next table. And I can tell you, for us, it has been terrific. We haven't had to even go to a counselor about this. It's been a journey of 10 years together now, or 13 years together now. We are here 10 years. And as I say to him, I love you more every day. So, in closing, I would like to say that I'm looking out at caregivers, all of us out here, and I am very impressed by what we've heard and seen today. It has helped me, that's for sure. We are loving, giving, caring people, both beautiful in spirit and strong in heart. We are caregivers, and we love ourselves enough to come to this summit and learn how to stay healthy in a very difficult time now and ahead. It would be wonderful if we could just say, United States government, could you please step in and take over my life and pay for everything, and it would all be done right? It's not, at least it's not now. And so we're the ones who are picking up the heavy burden and doing it. And we do it with love and compassion. Until that day comes that it's all done for us, let us close our eyes for a moment and remember with gratitude. Each day is a gift. Each day is a gift. Each day is a gift. And you can repeat it to yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. I'm going to ask everyone to please hold your questions till every panelist has a moment to speak. Our next speaker is Lesley Peters, and what impressed me about Lesley's stories is that it's a perfect example of how no matter how many times you get hit, as a caregiver, you stand up, you face what life is sending to you again, and somehow you get through it. It's really an inspirational story. I'd like to introduce Lesley Peters.
Thank you. Again, my name is Lesley Peters, and my journey began in 1998 when my husband's mother, Mary, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. At the time, she lived in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and we lived in Thornton, Colorado. In 2003, my father-in-law passed away, and in 2006, we made what we thought was the right decision and moved Mary to Colorado to live with us. At the time, our daughter Amanda was a senior in high school, and our son Noah was in elementary school. As you can imagine, our lives were extremely hectic. Besides having 2 active children and working full-time, Steve was also completing his master's degree. Mary began to really struggle with her disease. Along with tremors, trouble sleeping, and extreme freezing episodes, she suffered from painful dystonia. Her neurologist would increase her medication, but unfortunately the side effects were worse. It was 2007 when I first noticed Steve's tremor and that he no longer swung his right arm. Around the same time, Mary began to have a difficult time getting around our home. Going up and down the stairs was especially challenging. She was very independent and would not wait for us to get home if she needed something upstairs. After a serious fall, we realized that she needed more care than we could provide. We moved her into an assisted living facility, and that's when our lives changed forever. Between Steve's extremely stressful job, him staying up every night finishing his MBA, our daughter leaving home, and his mother's disease progression, Steve's symptoms seemed to get worse every day. He refused to acknowledge that there was a problem, and I was in such a state of denial that I allowed this to continue for quite a while. Seeing Mary struggle was so hard for so many reasons. I felt guilty that she was in a strange place and that we didn't have as much time to spend with her as we should, but seeing her scared me to death because I recognized in her things that I was beginning to see in Steve. Mary passed away in 2009, and we went back to Pennsylvania so that she could be buried with Steve's dad. By that time, Steve had completed his MBA, had received his MBA, and I had hoped things would calm down. He continued to have problems with tremors, and soon his coworkers began asking questions. He had a very high-pressure, highly visible job, and hiding his tremor became impossible. In 2010, Steve was incorrectly diagnosed with stress-induced essential tremor. We were both so relieved that it wasn't Parkinson's, and I clung to that diagnosis for as long as possible. By then, Noah was in high school, and Steve's job kept him very busy traveling internationally. Time seemed to be flying by. It was 2012 when Steve began having a resting tremor. Not too long after that, we received the devastating diagnosis. Due to apathy and cognitive changes, Steve wasn't able to continue working. For him, going from an executive position to having to apply for Social Security disability was very humbling. The next 2 years were extremely difficult. We isolated ourselves from everyone. I have a strong faith, but I really struggled to understand why our lives had taken this terrible turn. With the love and support of my family, I finally came to the realization that I needed to channel my energy into something positive. I began doing advocacy work and was invited to go to Washington, D.C. to discuss policy issues and how they impact people with Parkinson's disease. During that visit to D.C., I met some amazing people that have truly changed my life. In 2016, I was honored to be selected to be on the People with Parkinson's Advisory Council. Working with the Parkinson's Foundation has been beyond rewarding. Steve and I downsized and moved into our retirement home a little sooner than we had anticipated, but that's okay. Amanda recently married a wonderful young man, and her dad got to walk down the aisle. Noah graduated from Colorado Media School, has a good job, and has also begun doing his own advocacy work. Steve had deep brain stimulation, and it has helped tremendously with his tremors. In a few months, we'll be celebrating our 32nd anniversary. There is a life after a Parkinson's diagnosis. In closing, I'd like to read a quote by Joseph Campbell, who was professor of literature at Sarah Lawrence College. "We must let go of the life that we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us. This may not be the life we planned, but we are all in this together. I get great comfort knowing how hard the Parkinson's Foundation is working to make lives better for people with Parkinson's disease and their caregivers."
Thank you, Lesley. Addison will be speaking next, and what I found so moving about what he had to say was that in spite of what I would see as it can't get any lower, there is no way that a son caring for his mother can possibly withstand everything that Addison has gone through and that his mother has gone through. But one of the things that touched me the most is that it was all said and dealt with and expressed with an amazing sense of humor. So I found myself alternately crying and laughing. I hope you'll find what Addison has to say just as meaningful as I did.
Thank you, Caryn. A friend with whom I talk long distance each evening to debrief my caregiving day recently sent me a New Yorker cartoon. In it, a middle-aged man sits on one end of a sofa talking to a teenager sitting at the other end. And just off to the side, in the next room, a middle-aged woman stands at a kitchen sink, visibly paying attention to their conversation. A traditional picture of the nuclear family, you might say. Dad says to his teenager, "Here's the deal. We call the shots when you're young. You call the shots when we're old. And everything in between is a nonstop battle for control." It certainly gives new meaning to the term nuclear when talking about a family, doesn't it? With all due respect to the many experts here today, I submit to you that this is a rather accurate description of the continuum of collaborative caregiving. Caregiving is indeed about the balance of power, or put another way, about navigating the ethics of constantly shifting rights and responsibilities. My PD story actually began 4 generations ago with a maternal great-great-grandmother whose shaking palsy we now know as Parkinson's. The next chapter focused on my beloved maternal grandmother, who clearly remembered waking one day with a tremor and whose only medicine was prayer. The chapter following was about a maternal uncle who threw every available treatment and life-prolonging measure he could at his Parkinson's. The chapter I'm in the midst of now is devoted to my mother, who is nearly 87 and has lived with conservatively treated PD for over 20 years. And to think they used to say there was no way Parkinson's was hereditary. In this current chapter, I can pinpoint my first caregiving efforts, which in retrospect aren't unlike those of an occupational therapist. I noticed Mom was having difficulty navigating 3 aspects of dining. 1, taking dishes from cabinets above the kitchen counter. 2, drinking from an open vessel. And 3, handling silverware. I recommended plastic dishware. 2, drinking straws, flexible ones. And 3, a large curved plastic spork made by the camping outfit Light My Fire. Naturally, all 3 of my unsolicited suggestions were roundly rejected. So naturally, I mixed a set of what I hoped Mom would think to be cute plastic dishware in among her china. I stood an open box of flexible straws on the counter, and I put a large curved plastic spork in the silverware drawer. On my next visit, I noticed all 3 adaptations in use. So, again without permission, I moved all of the china out of the line of sight to lower cabinets. Nothing was ever said, but I don't think those dishes were ever used again. I submit to you that one could argue none of this was collaborative caregiving. And to that I would say, hey, we all have to start somewhere. I can also tell you precisely where in this current chapter I transitioned from advisory to direct caregiving. It was when I took Mom's car keys. I was visiting there to offer support while her husband was in the hospital. And to be honest, I didn't think it through. If she wasn't going to drive herself, who was? Oh. And while at first blush my action sounds rather high-handed, it was, in fact, a collaborative moment. You see, Mom has always steadfastly guarded the secrets of her lead-footed driving record. To this day, she freely admits that she's always seen traffic signs merely as suggestions, not indications of the law. So it was nothing short of highly unusual that she told me a state trooper had pulled her over as she was on her way to the hospital to visit her husband. I asked what she'd done. All she offered was, he said, the next time is my last time. So I asked, do you know what that means? She grinned mischievously and said, yes, I get one last joyride. I soberly informed her that I would not bail her out of jail or retrieve her car from the impound lot. If you listen carefully to that story, you can hear the moment when there was an exchange of power, our navigating the ethics of new rights and responsibilities. Taking the keys meant I was assuming responsibility for an activity of daily living, an ADL, that I'd never be able to give back, though she still regularly offers to drive. In fact, there have only been more ADLs for which I've become responsible. Collaborative caregiving is definitely on a continuum and absolutely involves a paradigm shift. I'm her son. Trust me, she's still very much my mom. But I'm her caregiver, essentially doing in reverse what she once did for me. So where does this leave me? Here's a hint. These roles aren't mutually exclusive. I am both son and caregiver. It turns out that both and thinking is crucial to well-being, both ours and that of our loved ones. I even offer you absolute assurance that being able to hold two seemingly opposed ideas in mind at the same time is what F. Scott Fitzgerald said is the sign of a first-rate intelligence. Congratulations. So I honor my mother just as you honor yours or your father or a spouse or a sibling or a friend, which means I am not being disloyal when I talk about Mom to others, whether they be you, members of a peer caregiver support group where I first met Dean, her doctor, her parish nurse, or even my doctor who monitors me for depression that I maintain, just like Dean, is as likely for the caregiver as it is for the person with PD. In fact, talking about her is a key to health, hers, mine, and that of our relationship. But I get it. We live in a culture of secrecy. I know men and women who have not told their spouses about their PD diagnoses. Couples who have not told their children one of their parents has PD. Employees who hide their diagnoses from their colleagues. We also live in a culture of strict gender and family norms. I'm not a caregiver, I'm just a loving husband doing what any man should do for his wife. I'm a son. How am I supposed to toilet and bathe my own mother? I submit to you that we do well, regardless of our political stripes, to learn about changing gender and family norms from the more marginalized communities around us. Because at some point, the secrecy and the rigidity simply have to stop for the sake of our loved ones and for ours. How can we truly be good spouses and significant others, sons and daughters, fathers and mothers, neighbors, co-workers, fellow worshipers, or friends, if we're dividing our energies between giving loving care and working at least just as hard to maintain appearances, even if it is for the sake of social or religious institutions? When Phoenix's National Public Radio affiliate interviewed me about a men's group I used to facilitate, I was blunt about what happens to male caregivers in particular who don't reach out for support. Unrelenting, unimaginable pressure builds up, and they break in really gruesome ways. If you live here in the Phoenix area, you should know what I'm talking about. The tragically common news reports generally state it this way: Mr. and Mrs. John Doe of Phoenix both passed away in their home last night. The police reports call it what it is: murder, suicide. I don't want to hurt Mom, nor do I want to break. So I reached out for support, including from the Lonnie and Muhammad Ali Parkinson Center and another local nonprofit, Duet, Partners in Health and Aging. And in so doing, I actually honored my loved one by being stronger and healthier, not to mention better informed. The first time I heard a man on a panel sponsored by Duet, not unlike this one so generously assembled by the foundation, when I heard that panelist say he'd left the workforce to care for a parent, I thought to myself, pay attention, Addison, because that may be you one day. And it was, starting with family and medical leave taken when Mom was first hospitalized and my siblings literally checked out of her life and mine. And then permanently, when it became clear to me that even in Phoenix, the unofficial capital of Parkinson's, the admonition that medications must be administered on time, every time, means absolutely nothing to emergency rooms, the med-surg floor, independent living communities, assisted living, skilled nursing, and memory care. I mourn the loss of my professional identity. I still regularly dream about teaching, publishing, speaking, and wake heavy with melancholy. I keenly feel the social isolation of this life. Old friendships are difficult to maintain. New friendships are hard to find. Dates are completely out of the question. And in truth, right now, I don't have hope for my future after caregiving. I can't realistically see or even dream of anything. My grief is real. Indeed, both Mom and I are living lives of ambiguous loss. She stays true to the process of living despite having to say goodbye on a regular basis and with incredible dignity to those things which have defined her. I stay true to appreciating the moments she is here, in the wisdom she still possesses, in tucking her into bed as she once did me, in mutually appreciating the breathtaking sunsets we have here in the desert Southwest. And at the same time, I grieve the moments she is not here because of the dementia, when memories can no longer be shared, when her repetition becomes maddening, when defeat is the only word that comes to mind when I think of the well-intentioned but totally misguided phrase, "We're going to beat this thing together." If I were to impart any words of wisdom, it would be these. Utilize the social workers in your midst, the Patties, at the Muhammad Ali Center and at Duet, if you are here in Phoenix, at hospice, at the hospital, at adult daycare, through your health plan, to facilitate conversations between you and among you, your loved one, and others who might be or are also involved in caregiving. Think of it as Dean's table plus an additional guest. Mom, her wonderful husband, my siblings and I, we never had such courageous conversations, to our mutual detriment. But I have them now. In fact, I'm in the midst of one right now, a conversation with Mom that's being facilitated by her parish nurse. And I submit to you, these conversations can only be courageous when skillfully facilitated. Spouses talking about having to set up separate bedrooms so the caregiver can sleep without interruption should never, in my mind, attempt such a conversation alone. Adult siblings talking about whether they even feel inclined to care for a parent should have the right to voice their opinions without being shouted down or shamed. It takes a special kind of skill to tell you the hard truth that your loved one has the right to fall in her own home. The ethics of caregiving and receiving, navigating the rights and responsibilities that constitute the balance of power, are not unlike ballroom dancing, but with a twist. One moment, one dancer leads. In the next moment, the other leads. Old notions of men as leader and women as follower no longer apply. What doesn't change, though, is that the couple would never dream of setting foot on the dance floor without first getting expert guidance. I submit to you that we should be doing the same all the while our caregiving stories are being written. Just think, this means that silly TV series, Dancing with the Stars, actually has something very valuable to teach us about caregiving. Again, thank you, Caryn, and thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Addison. I was looking around the audience and I saw a number of you pulling out Kleenexes, so I know that you were as moved as I was by what you had to say. The next story is being told by Lisa Seghetti, and I think that what touched me most deeply about what Lisa will be telling you is that I don't think there's a person in this room who hasn't been where she was. Lisa was in her 40s when she began to care for her father who had Parkinson's. And one of the things that she said to me after she had suffered her own health crisis was, I don't remember myself during that period. I didn't care for myself. I had 2 biopsies. I don't remember any of that. Lisa Seghetti.
Okay, so I clearly was dealt a bad hand. Yesterday we met, we talked about, okay, what order? And I didn't think anything of going last, but after hearing all of these stories, I don't know if I can get through mine, but I'll try. My story is one of lessons learned. As Caryn mentioned, my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2008. However, he had been living with the disease for many years. I'm sure my dad's story is a similar one, and the way I, as my father's caregiver, dealt with the disease may sound familiar. My father was a Southern black man who literally pulled himself up by his bootstraps to make a better life for himself, his parents and siblings, and eventually his own family. He brought all of his pride and manliness to his illness, often resisting my care and assistance. So it wasn't uncommon for my dad to resist family members who urged him to see a doctor. After more than 5 years, to the best of my recollection of observing symptoms he was displaying, I took it upon myself to schedule an appointment at a movement disorder clinic and insisted that he goes. He did, and it was at this time that he was officially diagnosed with PD. My father had colon surgery due to colon cancer in 2010, 2 years after his PD diagnosis. I stayed with my father in the hospital because, as Addison mentioned, I was concerned, quite frankly, that they were not going to give him his medication. It was during this time that I was diagnosed with a chronic health condition. It is believed that the stress I was under dealing with my dad's health issues and caring for him either exacerbated or triggered my own health crisis. I was also under personal stress. And mind you, stress doesn't necessarily have to be bad stress. I had an 8-year-old, I was engaged, and I had a demanding job. And lastly, my mother was showing signs of increased dementia. Caryn mentioned, I did lose sight of myself. I don't remember. When I look back at the time and I reflect on what I was going through, I honestly do not remember me during that period. I don't know how I made it through. Looking back at that time, I realized that I did not have a support system. One thing I know today that I didn't know then was that by having someone to simply listen to me was critical to my well-being. 2 quotes ring true for me, and I think they will resonate with you. The first one is, asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It is an investment in yourself as a care partner. I borrowed both of these quotes, by the way, from the Parkinson Foundation. The second quote, as a care partner, taking the time to honor, value, and love yourself is not a luxury. It's an absolute necessity. It's okay if your loved one's disease does not take center stage. Again, I missed the boat with both of these during the time my dad was with us. A year after my dad's colon surgery, his level of care changed, necessitating my full-time involvement with his care. My father struggled immensely with activities of daily living, but he refused to let me help him with most of these activities. I had to find a balance between the things that I could either overlook or did not rise to a level of needing perfection and the things that required my involvement. To be honest with you, I failed at this task. I often exerted myself over my father because I didn't like to see him struggle. I said earlier, my dad was a very proud man. He raised a very proud daughter. We often went head-to-head on many things. Witnessing my father deteriorate to someone I barely recognized and watching him struggle to do things we tend to take for granted were the most difficult moments I've ever experienced. Hindsight always gives us the benefit of 20/20 vision. And my advice to all of you, if you're not already doing it, is to learn how and when to offer help. My dad was trying to hold on to his independence, and while I knew that at the time, it still pained me to see him struggle. Another piece of advice I would give to others, and certainly to myself if I had a do-over, is to be patient with your loved one. Let him or her retain as much control over his or herself as possible. Resist the urge to intervene and take over a task because your loved one is struggling. Instead, help them with the task, letting them do as much as possible. I believe by doing this, we not only honor our loved ones, but we also honor ourselves. My relationship with my father was special. I was always his little girl. When the disease had its way with my father, I found our roles reversing. My dad had become dependent on me. During this time, I knew the importance of preserving our relationship, and it was demonstrated just weeks before my father passed away. Caryn made me do this.
It's my fault.
I'm going to get through it. One more segment. I want to close by sharing one of my favorite memories that I believe epitomizes my relationship with my father and his determination. I married for the second time on October 6, 2012, just 3 weeks before my father's passing. My dad was bound and determined to be at my wedding. We married in Malibu, California, which meant my dad and mom had to fly to get there. Although we're from California, we don't live there. So I knew the flight would be difficult for him, but I knew he wasn't going to miss his baby girl's wedding. My father couldn't walk me down the aisle. My brother did the honors. But my dad was waiting for me as I reached the altar. My brother helped our dad to his feet. There was a moment that our photographer caught, and it's captured forever in a picture. Due to my dad's frozen face, he lost the ability to smile, something he was known for. The picture shows my dad turned towards me with one corner of his mouth just barely lifted, turned up. It was clear to all of us my dad was smiling from ear to ear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just right to end. You're welcome. Just right.
We have just a few minutes for questions and answers. Hopefully answers, but we have just a few minutes for Q&A. Please raise your hand, and the lady with the mic will bring it to you. Don't be shy. These people have really laid their hearts on the table.
We have a question from our internet audience. What if the person with Parkinson is resistant to doing things to improve their situation?
We can't hear you.
What if the person with Parkinson's is resistant to doing things to improve the situation? For example, fighting the caregiver's attempts to help them, resisting meds, not exercising, etc.
Yes, Addison.
I think you heard a little bit of that from each of us in one way or another with our loved one. Resistance is futile in my world. No, I think this is where you ask for a moderator. That is essentially what I'm proposing today. It's different and it's new, and I recognize that. But I do not believe that we should be attempting to surmount that resistance on our own. Relationships with sons and daughters are being turned on their head. Relationships with spouses are being challenged in ways they've never been challenged before. Why on earth would we think that we are capable of handling this ourselves? So I'm going to reiterate what I said. We need to involve mediators. It's ironic that we have people who get doctoral degrees in conflict mediation when what we really need them for is caregiving mediation.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Thank you all for being here today. This has been extremely helpful. But as children of Parkinson's parents, do you personally live with this cloud over your head that it may be you, that you may develop it? And how do you deal with that on a daily basis?
Lisa?
Yes, I do a little. A couple of years ago, I had my thyroids removed, and I want to believe as a result of the surgery, I've been having issues swallowing primarily liquids. It's a very deliberative process. I see my endocrinologist often, and in fact, I'm going in for some more testing in a couple of weeks. The Parkinson's always at the back of my head. My dad wasn't the first in our family. He had a first cousin who also suffered from Parkinson's disease. So yes, I would say yes, though I try not to let it take over. It's there, though.
Thank you. Next question. Right over there. The mic's right behind you, right there.
So did you cry a lot when your family almost died? Your loved ones?
I'm sorry, could somebody repeat the question?
Did you cry a lot when your loved ones died?
I'll let Lesley take that one.
Yeah. Yes, especially along with losing Mary, who was an unbelievably strong, independent woman. There was also that sense of guilt. At the time that she was diagnosed, I had never heard of Parkinson's disease. She was seeing a general neurologist. I had never heard of a movement disorder doc. Her outcome could have been completely changed if we would have known to take her to a movement disorder doc. So there was a lot going into it. But yes, I definitely cried a lot when Mary passed away.
Addison?
I want to say to you, as you might have seen from each of us up here today, it's okay to cry a lot now, too.
It is.
Because we're losing our loved ones right in front of our very eyes very slowly. And that's worth crying about now, not just at the end.
There's a gentleman back there with a question.
Being realistic, we're in the grieving period long before the person passes away, is my theory. I was interested if any of you comment or thought that way.
I'm sorry, we did not hear you.
Let me try again. I think we're in a grieving period long before somebody passes away, and I think recognizing this makes it easier as to what we have to get through.
Right. That wasn't a question, but I do understand.
There is a term for it, disenfranchised grief. Disenfranchised grief is what we experience. There are no greeting cards for it. That's how you know it's disenfranchised.
Thank you. Do we have time for one more question? One more question.
We have a question again from our internet audience. What suggestions do you have for a new caregiver of a Parkinson's disease spouse? What resource have you found most helpful?
Dean?
I would have to say the Muhammad Ali Parkinson Center. Amen. Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We in Arizona are very lucky.
Okay, I'll be quick. My husband was recently diagnosed, but he's had a long history of a disability. And so he's always had a very positive attitude. And it was like this was what broke the camel's back. And I've been struggling as a caregiver of keeping his spirits up and knowing what is being enabling and what is not, you know, in his benefit to keep him strong and forward-looking still, because life still goes on. And that's, he's recently come under a lot of care, and that's been really helpful to me to have outside, you know, things like speech therapy and stuff like this, because as a caregiver, you have no idea, and you don't know really what your responsibilities entirely are and what's the most helpful to the patient.
Thank you very much. I think our time is up. I want to thank everyone on the panel once again for laying out their stories in such a very personal way. And I'd like to thank each one of you. Stay seated. Stay seated.
Thank you very much, Thank you very much, Caryn, and for all of you sharing your very, very special, unique story. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. For those around the country and around the globe tuning in, all the managers of our satellite locations, thank you for your coordination. For all the ones who are organizing the viewing parties out there, thank you for your organization. And for those tuning in online in the comfort of your home, we appreciate that you are here today with us. We'd also like to do a shout out and a thank you to our amazing interpreters, when half of you have already been listening into them. Ziomara Smith and Debbie Brennis in the back booth over there. We thank you so much.
We also want to make a big thank you to our planning committee and to the Parkinson's Foundation staff who helped make this a reality. And most importantly, we want to thank each of you who has tuned in, whether you are in person at an event or watching from the comfort of your home today, or if you're watching in the future on the archived video. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for being involved and for letting us share all of this information with you. I want to make sure that you all fill out your evaluations. Let us know what you think about, what you thought about the presentations today, what we can do differently, what topics you'd like to hear from us in the future. Remember that the Parkinson's Foundation is here when you need us every step of the way. And lastly, we want to give a huge thank you to our presenting sponsor, Acadia Pharmaceuticals, who, without their support, we never could have done this, and we couldn't have done it to this huge scale that we've been able to do so. So finally, and I'm going to help Lisa out on this, we want to thank you for joining us for the 2018 Caregiver Summit Cumbre para Cuidadores.